let's go ahead and start in Revelation 13:1, and we're just going to do these first 4 verses. In Revelation 13:1, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. So the idea here is that John is in his vision is standing on top of the sea sand, but he's looking. Now remember, John wrote this from Patmos, and when he's looking over the Mediterranean, he's looking towards Rome. And so he's seeing out of the Mediterranean in his vision this sea beast rise up out. And this beast has, it says, 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. And then he adds one more detail, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Now, we don't have to guess what this is. I see a lot of commentaries where people are guessing. The Bible tells us what this is. Let's go ahead and look at the interpretation of this. It's found in Revelation 17 in 9 through 12.
And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast.
Okay, so here we have basically the interpretation. There's no reason to really wonder about this. We say that the seven heads are representative of we know where they're from. They're 7 kings or 7 leaders, but we specifically know it's from Rome because this is the famous 7 hills in Rome. It's like these leaders are represented by the 7 famous hills in Rome. Now, there's a lot of detail in Revelation 17, and we'll get into that when we get to Revelation 17, so I don't want to focus too much. But it also tells us that these horns are like governors or kings. They're a progression. So remember the line of Caesars. We talked about this in the dating of Revelation. So the one that is Nero. And we'll get into that a little bit more when we get into Revelation 17. We've already touched on that in our dating of the book of Revelation. But for now, all we really need to know is that the purpose the Holy Spirit has in Revelation is to reveal Jesus Christ. This is not meant to be an expansive historical document explaining to us every detail about Rome. But what it is a covenantal treaty that's telling us in covenantal terms the story of Jesus in his dealing with the apostasy of Israel and the bride of Christ. That's all that's trying to be communicated here. We're not going to this to be able to find the history of Rome. Suetonius would be a good resource for that. That's not what we're trying to get across here. So if you think that there's a lot of important details missing from the aspect of Rome, it was never intended to be that. We learn in chapter 1, of course, this is the revelation of Jesus Christ to the 7 churches as a warning to make sure you're right with God when you're going through this terrible, terrible time in the area of emperor worship of these 7 churches. And so that's the purpose here. But we learn, for the sake of today and what we're trying to accomplish, we can see coming out of the sea, out of the abyss, out of the place of uncertainty and chaos and not knowing, towards the Gentile empire of Rome, we see this monster from the water that can't be so easily killed with a headshot, a head wound. And so there's 7 heads. And in fact, we can see this lines up with the succession of Caesars and so forth. So we'll get into the horns and the crowns. One thing I want to mention in verse number 1 is it says, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Now, Chilton said this. He said, according to the Roman imperial theology, the Caesars were gods. Each emperor was called Augustus or Sabastus, meaning one to be worshipped. They also took on the name of Divus or God, or even Deus or Theos, meaning God. So when these guys were introducing themselves, many times they would even introduce themselves by starting off by saying, "Hi, I'm God so and so," and that was a name that was attributed to the Caesars. It was completely blasphemous. The cities that we're talking about here, the seven churches, all of them had emperor worship in them, and so this is a heavy, heavy emperor worship idea. And so, of course, it would make sense that the beast, what is beast in this case? It is all of Rome put together. The sea, as we've learned in previous lessons, the sea is representative of the Gentiles. So, of course, this is the Gentile world power beast that has not recognized God, the God of the Bible, the one true living God, as their king. And so, in this sense, they have become beast-like in this sense. So this is what we're seeing in Revelation chapter 13 in verse number 1. Let's move on to verse 2. John begins to describe him further and says, "And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear. His mouth was as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority." Now, we already learned in chapter 12 who the dragon is. The dragon is Satan. It's that old serpent, the devil, connected back to Genesis 3:15. And so we know who that is.
Mm-hmm.
So now we know who the beast is and we know who the dragon is. The beast is Rome in its entity, the whole world dominating power of the Roman Empire. And then this Roman Empire has unique leaders along the way that we're calling heads of the Roman Empire. And they can be swapped out. It's not important for this, the story. It might be Nero here. And then, of course, we're going to see Nero is going to kill himself. And there's going to be a time of civil war. Remember, in our dating of Revelation, we have in AD 69, the year of 4 emperors, when everybody thought the world was ending because Rome was in a full-out civil war. And how scary to think the only world power was at war with itself. And that's going to be reflected also in our chapter here. And so we have this imagery in verse 2. "And the beast which I saw was like unto a," now let's keep in track here, "a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear. His mouth was as the mouth of a lion. And on top of that, another entity, the dragon, which is Satan, gave him his power and his seat." That's talking about authority. And it reiterates, "and great authority." Now, we have already heard about some sort of a beast that looks just like this. This is a callback to Daniel chapter 7 and verses 4 through 6. Jimmy, if you don't mind. Daniel 7, verses 4 through 6.
"The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it."
So here we see the imagery that is in the book of Daniel. He's getting a vision of the beast. And I should have had you read this, but in verse number 3, in context, it says, "And 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, diverse from one another." Now, the description that we see of the beast coming up out of the sea in Revelation 13 is the exact same descriptions, but we see it in reverse order. Remember, here in this one, we see a lion, and then we see a bear, and then we see a leopard. And it's the opposite that we see in Revelation 13. But it's important to note that the 4th beast of Daniel is a combination of the first 3 beasts. So when we have these distinct characteristic of a beast, when we get to the 4th beast in Daniel, it's like a combination. It's like the worst of the worst. The 4th beast in Daniel is a combination of the first 3 beasts all put together. Like, man, if you thought a lion was bad, or you thought a bear was bad, or you thought a leopard was bad, and of course we're talking about a lion with its ability to hunt and its ability to crouch and its quickness combination. a bear, just extreme power. If a bear gets a hold of you, it's over. You gotta stay away from the bear. But then, my goodness, then we combine that with a leopard, known for its speed. You have a mass killing machine. And the fourth imagery of the beast is all these military characteristics. The fourth beast in Daniel is a combination of the previous three. Now, let's go ahead and head back to Daniel chapter 2. And this is the famous story of, as you can see, we'll probably end up doing most of Daniel trying to do this study, but it would be good for us at some point to do Daniel verse by verse also. But in Daniel chapter 2, in verses 36 through 40, we're going to see Daniel and the image that Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, another dream image. We've already talked about one in Daniel 4, but this time it's the image of the statue. Remember the statue image? What we know the statue image really was is actually a chronological prophecy of successive kingdoms. So we know that the top of the image was gold, that was representative of Babylon. And then we know as we move down the statue, there's four kingdoms being talked about. It goes in order: the Babylonians, the Medo-Persian Empire, then Alexander the Great takes over, the Grecian Empire, the Greeks, and then the Roman Empire is the fourth one. And so the Roman Empire is a combination in being terrifying of the first three kingdoms all combined. Rome was the bad boy at the end. That's where Jesus was born, into that empire. So that's what this is talking about in Daniel chapter 2. Let's go ahead and read together. In Daniel 2, we'll just read 36 through 40 and then 44 and 45.
This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given unto thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. Now 44 and 45. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. But it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Forasmuch as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure.
So here, Jimmy, we have something here that I don't think anybody even argues this. I believe that futurists, as well as those that would view some of this already being fulfilled, I think both camps are on the same page in Daniel chapter 2, that I've always heard this taught this way my whole life, that the head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian kingdom, and then it's taken over by the Medo-Persian Empire, and that's taken over by the Grecian Empire in the intertestamental period with Alexander the Great, and that's then dominated by Rome. And here's the key to this thing. Very, very clearly stated in verse 44, Daniel says, and in the days of these kings. What kings? Well, the succession of kingdoms that we just talked about. So in the days of these kings, you don't have the ability grammatically, you don't have the ability in flow of thought in the whole point of the book. You don't have the ability to say, oh, this must be in our future about America. It's not what it's talking about. It literally says here, in the days of these kings, which puts you in the first century, what's going to happen? The God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And so the imagery then, there's one other part to this thing to make the whole thing very clear. So that you have this great statue that it's going all the way up, and we have these successive kingdoms in order: Babylon, Medes and Persians, Grecian, Roman Empire. And then the toes, if you remember, the toes are a mixture of clay and of iron. Now, you've always heard Rome rules with this rod of iron idea, and Rome is known for this iron, this being tough. But there's a weakness in the toes, in the foundation. It's mixed with clay. And so we're going to see the Roman Empire starting to have weaknesses, especially when we're heading towards the destruction of the temple. AD 69, that civil war that seeps in, the year of the four emperors start to seep in, and there's a lot of turmoil and infighting in the Roman Empire. And so the imagery then is, if you can believe this, Daniel looks over and he sees in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, once he sees this great image, successive kingdoms, he then looks over and he sees a mountain. And out of the mountain it says this right here, a little stone is formed, and it says, without hands. Wow, a little stone is formed without hands. This is a reference, I believe, to the virgin birth of Christ. Jesus is this little stone right here, and there was no man involved. But this is a reference to, I believe, the virgin birth of Christ through Mary. And here we see in the dream a little tiny stone made without hands comes over, and it just hits the great image right on the toe. And I can almost imagine hits the toe, and a little tiny hairline fracture starts, seemingly insignificant. A little hairline fracture starts, and Jesus dies on the cross, and Jesus resurrects, and he commissions the 120 in the upper room, and all of a sudden the book of Acts is a bloodbath where the gospel is beginning to take over, and it's starting to destroy the Roman Empire from the inside out, not with military might or not with weapons. Peter, put away your sword. We're going to do this thing through love and by the gospel and through faith. And the Roman Empire begins to crumble, and that little hairline fracture begins to go throughout all the feet and all the foundation, and the whole thing comes tumbling down. And then he looks over in his dream and he sees that little stone that hit the giant, the image, and that little stone then, progressive word, becomes a mighty mountain. That's the gospel growing as time goes on, as Jesus says that even the gates of hell itself cannot begin to stop this movement that we're calling the Church of Jesus Christ. And so here we see a very clear reference to exactly what we're learning about. That let's go ahead and head back now to Revelation chapter 13. So we see now, maybe this will make more sense. Verse number 2, and the beast which I saw was like unto, now we have these characteristics of the first three empires, was like unto, now this is one beast. So according to Daniel chapter 7, which one beast had the characteristics of these first three beasts? What was the last one? Remember, the fourth beast is the one that took on all the characteristics. So it couldn't be any clearer that this is talking about, this beast is the Roman Empire, which had characteristics of the Babylonian, the Medes and Persians, and the Grecian Empire. It's the fourth beast.
But I like my future revelation, Ken. You're just ruining this.
I'm sorry. Trust me, I want to sell books too. I'm not going to sell any books like this. So, yeah, I know. The story is what it is. I can't change it, but it's pretty plain here.
It's pretty clear.
It's pretty clear. So now we see the characteristics of everything that was described in the days of Daniel, of this being the Roman Empire that conquered the Grecian Empire. And in the days of these kings, God would set up his forever kingdom. What the text says. Now, how did Rome get its power? From Satan. That's all verse 2 means.
If you like this video, hit that like and subscribe button, and check out the full episode by clicking the link below.